Hello and welcome to another edition of the Spiritual Combat. We're already up to chapter 10. Thank you so much for joining. If you are new to the channel, this is a series deepening your understanding on what daily spiritual combat truly is. It's really a class in self-exorcism because we're cleaning out the closets here. So if you're just jumping into chapter 10, I'd love it. Go back to chapter 1 or even the introduction, so that way you get an idea of where it's going to go. Or just join. We'd love it if you'd stay. Thank you all so much. Please smash that like button hard because it puts it up in the top of the algorithm, and YouTube has an algorithm, and we would love more people to find out about what it takes to achieve this spiritual combat. Now, just an introduction. I am Sister Pharaohs. I am a spiritual formation director, a lay sister in the Franciscan Third Order, and I also work in the Office of Exorcism and Spiritual Deliverance. So, suggestions and comments, please put them below. Right now, we're going to get prayed in to Dom Scupoli's The Spiritual Combat. So hold on to your hats. We're going to jump right in, kids. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sanctus, sic erat et principio et nunc et semper et saecula saeculorum. Amen. Sancta Michael Arcangele, defende nos in prelio contra naquitsimit sidis diobliesto presidium. Imperidere Deus supplicis de precamur tuque, princeps maletia celestis, sed animaliosque spiritus malignos, qui ad perditionem animarum pervergantur in mundo divina virtute, in infernum detrude. Amen. Our study prayer. Concede mihi misericordias, Deus, quae ti placita sunt adenter, investigare, veritater, agnoscere, et perfecte ad implere ad laudem et gloriam nominis tui. Amen. Grant me grace, O merciful God, to desire ardently all that is pleasing to thee, to examine it prudently, to acknowledge it prudently, to accomplish it perfectly, for the praise and glory of thy name. Amen. Thomas Aquinas. Chapter 10. The exercise of the will, the end to which all of our actions, interior and exterior, should be directed. We have spoken concerning the necessity of regulating one's understanding. It is necessary also to control one's will so that it is not abandoned to its own inclinations, but it is conformed entirely to the will of God. It must be observed that it is not sufficient to desire or even to execute what is most pleasing to God. It is also requisite to desire and to perform our action under the influence of His grace and out of willingness to please Him. Here will arise the greatest struggle with our nature, constantly thirsty for its own pleasure, even in lofty spiritual undertakings. It seeks its own satisfaction, residing there without the least scruple, since there is no apparent evil. The following is the result. We begin acts of religion, not from the sole motive of doing the will of God, but for a sensible pleasure that often accompanies such acts. The illusion is still more subtle as the object of our affection is more commendable in itself. Who would imagine that self-love, criminal as it is, should prompt us to unite ourselves to God? that in our desire to possess him, we should pursue our own interests rather than his glory and the accomplishment of his will, which should be the only motive for those who love him, seek him, and profess to keep his laws. If we desire to avoid such a dangerous obstacle, we must accustom ourselves not to desire or execute anything unless it is through the impulse of the Holy Spirit, combined with the pure intention of honoring him who desires to be not only the first principle, but also the last end of our every word and action through the observance of the following method. As soon as an opportunity presents itself to perform such a good action, we must prevent our heart from seizing upon it before we have considered God. This will enable us to know whether it coincides with his will, and whether we desire it solely because it is pleasing to him. When our will is controlled and directed in this way by the will of God, it is motivated only with the desire to conform entirely to him and to further his glory. The same method is to be followed in rejecting whatever is contrary to his will. The first move is to raise our minds to God and to know what is displeasing to him, and then be satisfied with its rejection. We conform to his holy will. We must remember that it is extremely difficult to discover the deceptions of our fallen nature. It is always fond of making itself, for very questionable motives, the focal point of all things. It flatters by persuading us that in all our actions, our only motive is to please God. What we accept or reject, then, is actually done to please ourselves. While we erroneously imagine that we act out of a desire to please or a dread of displeasing our sovereign Lord. The most effective remedy against evil is purity of heart. Everyone engaged in the spiritual combat must be armed with it, discarding the old man and putting on the new. The remedy is applied in this way. In everything that we undertake, pursue, or reject, we divest ourselves of all human considerations and do only what is comfortable to the will of God, conformable. It may happen that in many things we do, and especially in the interior impulses of the heart, or in swiftly transient exterior actions, we may not always be conscious of the fluence of this motive, but at least we should be so disposed that virtually and habitually we act from the viewpoint of pleasing God. In more prolonged activities, this virtual intention is not sufficient. It should be frequently renewed and develop to its full stature in purity and fervor. Without this, we run the great risk of deception by self-love, which always prefers the creature to the Creator, and so deceives that, in a short time, we are imperceptibly drawn from our primary intention. Well-meaning, but vulnerable persons generally set out with no other purpose than to please God. But by degrees, they permit themselves, without knowing it, to be lured away by vanity. They forget the divine will, which first influenced them and are completely absorbed in the satisfaction afforded by their own actions, and in the advantages and rewards they expect. If it happens that while they think they are accomplishing great things, Providence permits them to be interrupted by sickness or some accident, they are immediately dissatisfied and criticizing everyone about them, and sometimes even God himself. This is clear evidence that the motive, the force behind their actions, was bad. Anyone who acts under the influence of divine grace and only to please God is indifferent as to his course of action. Or, if he is inclined to some particular activity, he completely submits to Providence the manner and time of doing it. He is perfectly resigned to whatever success attends his undertakings, and his heart desires nothing but the accomplishment of the divine will. Therefore, let everyone examine himself. Let him direct all his actions to this most excellent and noble end. If he discovers that he is performing a work of piety in order to avoid punishment, or to gain the rewards of a future life, he should establish as the end of his undertaking the will of God, who requires that we avoid hell and gain heaven. It is not within man's power to realize the efficacy of this motive. The least action, no matter how insignificant, performed for his sake, greatly surpasses actions which, although of greater significance, are done for other motives. For example, a small alms given solely in honor of God is infinitely more agreeable to him than if, from some other motive, large possessions are abandoned, even if this is done from a desire to gain the kingdom of heaven. And this, in itself, is highly commendable motive, and worthy of our consideration. The practice of performing all of our actions solely from the intention of pleasing God may be difficult at first. With the passing of time, it will become familiar and even delightful, if we strive to find God in all sincerity of heart, if we continually long for him, the only and greatest good, deserving to be sought, valued, and loved by all his creatures. The more attentively we contemplate the greatness and goodness of God, the more frequently and tenderly our affections will turn to that divine object. In this way, we will more quickly and with greater facility obtain the habit of directing all our actions to his glory. In conclusion, there is a final way of acting in complete accordance with this very excellent and elevated motive. This is fervently to petition our Lord for grace, and frequently to consider the infinite benefits he has already given us, and which he continues to bestow every moment from an undeserved and disinterested affection. Wow. This chapter on the will, the exercise of our will, it outlines It outlines our pitfalls. It outlines what we ought to look at as our motives. It outlines how to identify when we might be falling in a pitfall of our motives to please God. I really enjoyed the whole outline of this because I caught myself in so many of these instances in my mind thinking this is what I was going to do because I thought this was a good thing to do, and I had this opportunity and I thought, oh, I'm going to do this right away, and it turned out really bad. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So as we look at the focus of this chapter on the exercise of our will, and we're looking that it's just not good enough to desire to do God's will. It's not enough to just desire to make God happy. And the outline, the best of this is to desire to do these things and do them under grace. Grace. The beauty of God's grace. How do we catch grace falling from the sky? How do we run under that rain cloud and say, hey, pour some more grace on me? How do we find that place of grace? When we talk about grace and we talk about how do we obtain grace, in the Christian life, in the Christian walk, what we look at is not so much the definition, but the desire to obtain grace. Baptism, choosing to be baptized, releases God's grace in our life. In the Catholic faith, that happens usually shortly after, within a specific time after birth, that the parents ask for grace for the child upon his life for his baptism or her baptism. There's also something called the baptism of desire, desiring God's grace and praying the sinner's prayer, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. That is a baptism of desire that enables God's grace. Staying away from mortal sin is one of the number one things we have to do. So I don't want to get off on a segue too bad, but this whole understanding of doing God's will under grace is incredibly important to this chapter. And when we talk about, this chapter talks about the greatest struggle of our nature. Our nature, if we look at any situation that we've been in, it seeks the easiest path. What do I mean by the easiest path? When we need to desire God, what's the easiest way we can think of to make him happy? Well, let's just do something really quickly that, will get our obligation off right away. As in, for instance, when a Christian thinks about Lent and the offering of a penance or suffering that we can unite to Christ at this time in order to mortify our passions and kill our passions and get them rightly ordered. So how do we do this? What are we thinking of? We're thinking of opportunities and ways that we can perform a just, righteous act in order to offer it up. We're thinking of ways to align ourselves with the passion of Christ, of ways that we can capture this grace and basically stand next to Christ and do as he would have us do. And that's just not easy. It's easy to grab this opportunity, like this chapter says, and do something really quick because we see an opportunity to jump in and do something and think that this is just absolutely wonderful. Whereas this chapter is letting us know that we have to be careful, that our fallen nature is there to trip us up. And let us believe that something that we believe that we are doing that could be in accord with God's will may be, for our own reasons, pure vanity. It may be something that we think, well, if I do this, I am going to get A, B, and C, or I'm going to be recognized, or the end result will be that I'll receive this. It's vanity. Totally vanity. So when we look at our pleasure-seeking nature, and we feed that pleasure-seeking nature because it's instant. It's like our instant fast food places. We know we need something a little bit healthier, but we kind of want it fast and easy, and that feeds our adipose tissue. It's awful. Some of it is just like the chemicals hide our taste buds, so we don't know. Guess what? The same in spiritual warfare. A lot of things that we do that we don't take the time to do ardently, and we want it to happen so quick. We just want this fast pace. I want to be right there. I want to be the best I can attitude about getting close to God. We get our little chemical contact high of thinking, yes, I feel so good when I do this. I feel so good when I say these prayers. This has got to be God. This has got to be the Holy Spirit. And there are times when we're going to be so blind to feeding that vanity, we will not understand that we've deceived ourselves. That's what this whole chapter is about, is to step back and understand that we need to be separated from that attachment to pleasure in order to do God's will. And this is not going to be easy. This is going to take us, it's going to take us a lifelong journey to get there. It takes time. So we got to be patient with ourselves. Something else that I was writing down to talk about is resting in the wisdom of God's time and hand as He moves through the Holy Spirit. I find that when we look at the things that we think, well, I know what is good for my baby brother, or I know what's good for my sister, or I know how I can help my elderly parents, or when we look at those things externally that we believe we can place our hands on, and we think, this is an excellent opportunity to do this. This is an excellent opportunity to assist in this way. We attach positive outcomes, and we attach God's goodness to them for this opportunity. This chapter is telling us that we have to step back. We have to step back from those presuppositions that we've made about the act or the future action that we believe is going to be serving God. We really need to step back. Part of this is resting in God's time. And this is one of the hardest things for me. Most priests and most people in committees that I have ever worked on call me a bulldozer, because I only have one speed. It's either go or drop. It's not so good. There is a moderation, and there is a tempo that is God's time and not ours. And when we cannot wait, God finds ways to put gigantic boulders in our paths to say, you've got to slow down. This is going to be the way I planned it. This is my perfect plan. I don't have enough hands to name the things that I've had to have, and I've had to push through because I thought this was good. I thought this was the right way to approach it. I thought this was for everybody, and it wasn't for me at all. And I pushed and I pushed and I got my way, and the fruit that it bore was rotten. It's not good. Or it had the illusion of being good at first, but it had no staying power. It had no shelf life. And if it doesn't have a shelf life, don't you think that ought to give you an idea that there's something wrong? Or let's say with the opposite. I'm not going to name the brand of little cupcake cream-filled food that can sit on a shelf for 20 years. If it doesn't go bad after a while because it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. That's the nature. That's the nature of the thing. If you create a food product, yes, it ought to be good for a little bit, then it ought to degenerate. If it's not, don't you wonder why? The same is true when you plant your seeds and you force those seeds and you water those seeds and you just make sure you control everything, and the weeds sprout up and you get upset and the plants start dying and you're pointing fingers, yelling at people. What did they do? How did they not listen to you in the first place? That's not God's perfect time. That's an excellent illustration how you can look at a certain thing that you've done believing it was God's perfect will, and it wasn't. When we look to practice this spiritual walk and in seeking God's will, we have to, it begins with each of us in our heart. We have to be very, very cautious about obsessing over these things that we think are going to be good for other people. Especially the things, we covered in the last couple of chapters. Something may appear really good and very healthy or very spiritual. This new prophet may have this beautiful vision and have all these followers and be so popular. Light bulb turning on? Might not be God. That is the most important thing we can do, is lean on the wisdom of God, which is the Holy Spirit. When we get obsessive, and even in the things that we look at in our day and think, no, that can't be in God's will. God doesn't want that. God doesn't want that for me. Especially if it's something uncomfortable. Something that we think, oh, there's no way, I could never do this. Well, you know what they said about Moses? Moses was a stutterer. He got it done. Noah liked to drink a bit on the ark every day. When we look at these things about ourselves and think this can't be God's will, this can't be God's will, it's not for us to judge, it's for us to rely on the will of Him that created us. We have to look to the Holy Spirit. We have to look to that wisdom, detach ourselves from what we believe, and rest in peace so that it can be accomplished. We also need to look at, when we're looking at situations and we're looking at friends, we're looking at relatives, we're looking at things that volunteer opportunities, an opportunity to get a car, an opportunity to do something we've always wanted to do. Maybe it's first chair in the orchestra, and there's this way that you can possibly finagle your way to get it. If you wait, you might have a better opportunity for the tryouts, or if you don't wait, you can put a word in with a friend who can put a word in with another friend, and possibly finagle your way in the back door, thinking, well, this is God's opportunity. I wouldn't have this opportunity. We have to step back. And I think that if we look at these two ways to step into this decision of ours to prevent ourselves from jumping right off the boat and saying, yes, I'm going to run with this, we might have an easier time taking the time to relax and pray about it. If we are going to raise our mind towards God in order to know what is pleasing and what is displeasing to Him, we're going to be at peace. We're going to find that perfect peace by rejecting those opportunities that arise in order to conform to His holy will. Now, this chapter likes to point out, as we were saying earlier, our will is very narcissistic. Our will seeks to be applauded. That's why I absolutely love the humility prayer. If you're not familiar with the humility prayer, I do not have it on my website. I think that I have recorded it on the Latin prayers that we did on this channel. Okay, So if you click the link and subscribe, please, that would be wonderful. Or it may be on my Prayers by the Bead, where I sell lots of beautiful spiritual religious beads, rosaries, Anglican rosaries, 3 Hail Mary rosaries, chaplets of all sorts. This humility prayer, I had to pray this prayer, I'd say about 4 years, 5 years, every day. I had this prayer typed up in the bathroom. I had this prayer typed up in my Bible. I had this prayer on my nightstand, because the humility prayer was such a doorway for me to not only get into the will of God, but to come under the authority. And coming under the authority is one of the first and foremost things you must do in order to be able to do the will of God. If our fallen nature demands that we be vindicated, that we take center stage, that we be lauded and applauded and appreciated 24 hours a day, that's not God's will. How is that glorifying God and doing his will? It's not. So it took me, and I still do that prayer because I love that prayer every day, because I, do it weekly with the Auxilium Christorum prayers. However, the point here for this chapter is sometimes our fallen nature is hidden from us. This is what we need to watch out for. And I know this is going to be a subject that some people are going to bristle about. Guess what? I bristle too. It is true that what comes out of your mouth illustrates the state of your heart and your soul. If you speak words of love, there is love living in your heart. If you speak words of hate, hate is alive and well in your heart. If you speak words of rejection and anger and misery, there is unhealed anger and misery in your heart. This does not mean that you are broken and you cannot be healed. It means that you need Christ more than anything else. The beauty, the peace, and the promises that I have had in the last 6 years have been more than I've ever had at any time in my life, because I just gave up. I said, God, I can't do this. I can't do anything without you. We have choices. We may have hurt and anger and some ugliness in our heart. And from time to time, this is what I'm saying, I bristle too, because from time to time I'm angry about what's happened to my oldest child, about what's happened to my youngest child. I'm angry and I say words that are ugly sometimes, and then I have to ask the Father's forgiveness and say, forgive me, Father. In my weakness, I allowed this weed to grow. The Holy Spirit prompts us to pull those weeds, to pluck them before they grow into vines, choking our hearts and choking our minds, choking our desire to love Christ, choking our desire to seek people and places that will support our love of God. We choose self-destructive habits, self-annihilation, self-immolation, gluttony, despair. Don't let those weeds grow. If you've struggled, as we all do, I love it when people share their struggles below in the comments. And if you have any prayers you'd like to share for others struggling, please, down below in the comments, please post. Because we all do. We all struggle. with those little tiny weeds. And a lot of times we ignore them till it becomes so painful we have to get a pickaxe and a shovel to get them out. That's what our guardian angel's for, to remind us, excuse me, did you just hear what came out of your mouth? Sometimes we don't even realize the vile things that we say. In order to engage in this combat, I have to tell you, we cannot even begin to control and exercise our will until we rid ourselves of any human consideration and attachment to making ourselves look good, shining before everybody else, placing ourselves on a pedestal. We are not going to be able to conform to God's will. It just won't happen, I guarantee you. And the biggest thing that I see, especially, as people really, when we take calls to the Office of Exorcism, when I handle some of the emails and the calls, and God love you, I'm praying for all of you right now and what we're going through. The bottom line is that our fallen nature, we want it now. We want somebody else to do it for us. We want somebody else to be the blame. It's your fault. It's their fault. It's my mother's fault. It's my uncle's fault. You are responsible right now for what you think, what you are, and what you choose to be. No, you are not responsible if somebody hurts you. You are not responsible for the actions, deeds done against you, but you are responsible for how you choose to look at them and tackle them. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to mourn. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be righteously hurt and angry. But to allow them to grow as weeds in your heart so that you can damage and hurt other people, that's not okay. Oppression begins when we give in to vanity. Oppression begins when we begin to believe, and I'm talking about demonic oppression, that daily reminder that we're being watched and invited to sin every single day. Now, a lot of people say, well, you know what, you're just not that important. Demons aren't that interested in you. Maybe some big ones aren't, but I guarantee you, there's lots of invitations to temptation around. Call it what you will. Low-level temptation is still oppression. So we need to look at what are the two ways that they're talking about here for us, just to trudge through this, to get through this, to start enjoying some peace of mind from vanity, from the traps, from those things that get us into thinking, well, I'm going to do this and this is great, and boy oh boy am I going to be loved. People are just going to love me for doing this. How do we separate ourselves? How do we remind ourselves? How do we get in the practice of looking to conform to God's will? Well, number one thing I would tell everyone watching, as a Franciscan formation director, develop an intimate relationship with your guardian angel that God gave you. Some people are going to say, I don't believe in angels. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. The Bible said he will give his angels charge over thee. Not angel, angels, plural. There's a guardian angel over your life. There's a guardian angel over your family, over your property, over your city, over your marriage. God grants these superior beings to help you listen to his Holy Spirit. They are called messengers for a reason. They bring you the will of God. They also can bring deceit and destruction. This is why we must seek to conform to the will of God in everything we do. And how do we do this? How do we do this, people? All right, well, let's look at this. What does the chapter say? We need to petition. How do we petition? Like I said, share some prayers. The quickest way I can tell you that I petition, because we're all working. None of us are perfect. If we were perfect, we definitely wouldn't be here. By petitioning, prayer, asking, please. Spiritual contracts, I need to do a videotape on that, and I probably will this week or next week, because we are in the final throes of Passion here, Passion Week, with Holy Thursday and everything coming up. When we look at the petitions to God, our Father wants to give us those things that we love and the things that we're going to enjoy. The five senses are gifts: sight, smell, touch, hearing, taste, to be rightly ordered and enjoyed. When we petition, we are, especially if it's a silent petition, our mind, a prayer before you get in the car. Lord, watch over my journey. Before you have to talk to your boss, Jesus, please give me the words that will soften this person's heart. Before you lash out in anger at a child that has just destroyed something very valuable, oh God, please do not let me hurt this child. Because we must ask. You have not because you ask not. Ask for what you need. Petition your guardian angel. When you pray the guardian angel prayer, angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits you here ever this day, be at my side to light and guard and rule and guide. Ask your guardian angel, thank your guardian angel, say any little prayer in your head that you can think of that honors and glorifies God. Guardian angel, you know that my intentions are not God's. Please help me see and find God's intentions in this action that I'm doing. That's simple. We do not have to pray out loud to our guardian angel. Our guardian angel is a supreme being. You can think of your guardian angel in your head and activate that guardian angel anywhere and anytime. I don't care if it's in the middle of the night. Number one was petition. Number two, gratitude and thanksgiving. No, God does not need our thanksgiving. Jesus does not need our thanksgiving. However, to conform and develop the humility in order to understand the need for grace in God's will and doing God's will, gratitude and thanksgiving, little prayers all day long. Thank you for this parking place. Thank you. I found the exact cut of meat I was looking for. Thank you so much. There is no traffic on the road. Thank you so much. This was so much easier than I expected. Little prayers of thanksgiving throughout the day. And sometimes when I have gone through a spiritual exercise, I make myself wear a bracelet, a ring. You might want something physical on your body, or carry a special pen. Everybody has cell phones, set timers, every 5 hours. You want to say a cute little prayer, write the prayer out in your notes and your phone will go off. And it just says, thank you, God, I'm breathing and I'm here and I'm alive and I have the health and the mental wealth to have my faculties in order to be who you want me to be. Show me who you want me to be. Little prayers. So now this is such a lengthy one today, and there was just so much to cover. This is an ongoing lesson here. This will go. Looking and conforming to God's will is definitely going to be a lifelong challenge. 2 levels. For those of you following the class, level 1. For my level 1 boys and girls, this is Holy Week. And as we look at the will, and as we look at conforming to the will, I think that we need to start with, what is God's will? How are we supposed to know God's will? And if you're in level 1, if you're baptized, you're considering baptism, and I pray you do get baptized and understand that Christ is your salvation. We want to look at the easiest way is the 10 Commandments. So let's get our journals out tonight and let's just write 10 Commandments. What are the 10 Commandments? You got those all written out? That's nice you've got them. Now, we're going to draw a line in 1 through 10 with a little tiny arrow and an equal sign that will give you Christ's exhortation to his apostles, because this is going to be the one that we're going to be working on this week. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Yeah. God's will, huh? Well, let's see. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. This is going to remind you for this week, you're going to look for opportunities in reference to your neighbor. Who's your neighbor? Your next door neighbor? The neighbor behind you? The neighbor in the checkout, standing 6 feet away? The neighbor in the car in front of you in the fast food? Who is your neighbor? How do you love them as you love yourself? We feed ourselves. We tuck ourselves in bed. We pray for ourselves. When was the last time you looked at your neighbor across the street, the one that gets up at 5 in the morning and retches or makes disgusting noises, or they do something else that offends you, or who knows, they let their dog out till midnight barking and yapping. When was the last time you looked at your neighbor and maybe made the sign of the cross over yourself, or just held your heart and said, Lord, please bless this person. Bless them, Lord. Keep them. Propagate them. Grow them in your love. When was the last time any one of us did that? Okay, so I want you, my level 1 students, level 1 people, going through this to look for opportunities at least 3 times this week. I want you to look at these people, anyone, anywhere that you say, who would Jesus say is my neighbor? Who would he? Pray for them. Think of an opportunity that is not going to give the vanity the glory, but God the glory. In other words, don't tell the right hand what the left hand is doing. Pretty easy. All right, level 2. We're going to do the same thing. I want you to look at those 10 commandments. I want you to write them in your journal. And level 1, if you want to do this one in addition, you can, because this one's going to take you a little bit deeper. And it's a great exercise. You can do it over 4 weeks. There's 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. 4 Gospels, pretty easy, okay? Read 1 a week. How do we know what God's will? How do we know we're conforming to God's will? If you don't know what God's will is, how can you know it? You cannot know Christ unless you watch where he walked, watched how he talked. Go and be there with him. That's how we get to know the mind of God. 4 Gospels. Interesting reading, great reading. You get to read the exhortations, okay? So, you're going to do the same. You're going to write down the 10. You're going to look for a couple opportunities during the week to love thy neighbor as thyself. And one more thing I'd like you to do. As we do our examination of conscience at night this week for level 2, I would like you to specifically look for ways that you found yourself looking to love your neighbor, or you might have missed an opportunity to love your neighbor, and how might you recognize that better and journal it? I would like you to do that, at least write it down 3 times, but think about it every night. So write that in your journal, that as you do your evening examination of conscience, or examining, whatever you would like to call it, think about what was presented to you today. Think about the opportunity you had to share a smile, or a space, or you moved over for somebody. You didn't have to, but you did. Now, for both of my level people that are following me in this course and enjoying it like I am, my chosen meditation for the gospel today is going to be Luke 6:36. Why Luke? This one I just love this passage. Luke 6:36. Give, and it will be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, it will be put into your bosom. And for with the same measure you use, it will be measured back unto you. Luke 6:36. That concludes us. Please give us a huge like, share if you dare. I would love it if you'd subscribe. And if you have any questions, please post them below. Any suggestions, post them below. And never forget, the battle's already been won. We're here to practice the ways to give you peace, healing, health, and way more fun. So we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Good night.